Dad came home early that day. I knew something was different the moment the front door closed. Not the usual tired thud, something sharper, almost triumphant. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pushing cold potatoes around my plate, listening to him take off his shoes in the hallway. Then he walked in, and he was smiling. Dad almost never smiled when he came home from the factory. "Lita," he said to my mother, who was standing at the stove stirring something in a pot. "Come here." She turned around. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and placed it on the table like it was a medal from the Kremlin itself. "A voucher," he said. "The Carpathians. A children's sanatorium, 21 days. Mom wiped her hands on her apron and picked it up. I still didn't understand what was happening. "For Seryoja?" she asked. "For Seryoja." Dad nodded, looking at me like he'd just pulled me back from the edge of something. I was Seryoja. I only understood the vouchers later as an adult. After Chernobyl, Soviet factories and plants started distributing them, sending workers' children away to sanatoriums, to clean air, to somewhere far from whatever was drifting across the country. But at 14, I wasn't thinking about Chernobyl. It was 1991, and everything around us was slowly falling apart, the way things fall apart when you're still a kid, quietly, like background noise. The TV said troubling things. Store shelves were getting emptier. Dad had been coming home looking gray for months. But adults are good at pretending everything is fine, and kids are good at believing them. Dad had gotten the voucher through the factory union. He'd worked there 18 years, and this was the first time he'd received anything beyond a certificate on the bulletin board. He didn't say that to me directly at all, but I saw the way he held that piece of paper, both hands, carefully, the way you hold something you're afraid to lose. We lived on the 4th floor of a Khrushchev-era apartment block on Gagarin Street. 2 rooms, 1 bathroom, a balcony stacked with skis and 3-liter jars of pickled cucumbers. Mom had hung the wallpaper herself. Beige, tiny floral print. In the kitchen there was a Baikal Lake calendar and a stool with a broken leg that Dad had been meaning to fix for as long as I could remember. That evening Mom fried cutlets, not because it was planned, just because she was happy. Dad sat at the head of the table and explained, mountain air, 4 meals a day, health procedures, kids from all across the Soviet Union. "It's a good place," he said. I didn't really want to go. I wanted to stay in the city, hang out with friends, go swimming in the river. Summer had just started, but looking at my father and saying, "I don't want to," was impossible. He was so rarely proud of anything. "You leave on the 21st, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded and reached for a cutlet. Outside, kids were shouting in the courtyard. The sun was dropping behind the roof of the building next door. Somewhere at the other end of the apartment, the TV murmured. Something about Moscow again, about congresses, about decisions. Mom cleared the table, humming quietly to herself. Everything was the same as always, and very soon, nothing would be. Mom started packing 4 days before I left. The suitcase was old, brown, vinyl, with nickel-plated latches that snapped shut with a satisfying click. It only came out every few years. When we visited Grandma in Poltava, when Dad went to a training seminar in Kharkiv. It smelled like mothballs and something else. Something distant, half forgotten, like travel itself. She laid it open on the couch in the living room and began carrying things over, methodically, one armful at a time. I watched from the doorway. "Mom, why 3 pairs of underwear per day?" "Just in case," she said without turning around. That phrase, "just in case," explained everything in our family. An extra pair of socks, just in case. Stomach pills, headache pills, fever pills, activated charcoal, Band-Aids, gauze, just in case. A separate cloth pouch tied with string labeled first aid kit in block letters, just in case. She wrote my name on the waistband of every pair of underwear, in ink. I was 14 years old. "Mom," I said. "Quiet," she said. "There are 20 kids in that building. Everything gets mixed up." I went quiet. She made a packing list on a sheet of graph paper. 2 columns, neat handwriting. T-shirts, dress shirts, going out pants, everyday pants, a sweater, because mountain nights are cold even in summer. Indoor slippers and outdoor slippers, separate. Soap in a lidded soap dish, toothbrush in a case, toothpaste, shampoo decanted from the big bottle into a small one, a book, her choice, Jules Verne, The Children of Captain Grant. I didn't argue. Dad looked in that evening, saw the suitcase already half full, and said, "Lyda, he's going for 3 weeks, not a polar expedition." "Go watch your TV," Mom said. Dad left. The day before departure, she sat me down at the kitchen table and talked for 40 minutes straight. "Listen to the counselors. Go to every procedure, no skipping, it's for your health. Don't wander off the sanatorium grounds alone. Stay out of the forest. If you get sick, go to the nurse immediately, don't tough it out. Here's 15 rubles. Hide it in your sock, not your pocket, because pockets get picked." I listened and looked out the window. The neighbor kid Vitka was kicking a soccer ball around with his brother in the courtyard. The sun was still high, one of those long June evenings that only exist that way when you're a child. I thought about how 3 weeks from now summer would already be past its halfway point, that I'd definitely miss something. "Seryoja, are you listening to me?" "Yes, Mom." "Call from a payphone when you arrive. There are coins in the side pocket." "Okay." "And talk to people. Make friends. You always go quiet." I didn't answer. She sighed and got up to put the kettle on. That night I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, where the streetlight outside threw a blurry yellow patch that trembled slightly. Through the wall, the TV murmured. Dad had been staying up late watching the news. He always watched the news late these days. From the kitchen came the smell of cooling tea. The suitcase stood by the door, packed, latched, tagged with a luggage label Mom had written my name and the sanatorium's address on. It looked like something final. I closed my eyes. Outside it was quiet. Only somewhere down the block a dog was barking, long, drawn out, almost mournful, then going silent, then starting again. I fell asleep to that. Dad was up at 5 in the morning. I heard him moving through the apartment, carefully, trying not to make noise, but our floorboards creaked in the same spots every time, and I knew that route by heart. Hallway, kitchen, hallway again. Mom was already awake. They spoke in low voices about something grown up, something of their own, and I lay there with my eyes open watching the rectangle of the window slowly get lighter. We left the building at 6:30. Dad carried the suitcase. Mom walked beside me and said nothing. She'd already said everything yesterday, and now she just walked, glancing over at me every so often. The morning was gray and quiet, smelling of poplar trees and wet asphalt from the night's rain. The city hadn't woken up yet. A trolley bus went past, nearly empty, a sleeping silhouette in the back window. The station was packed. I hadn't expected so many people that early. The platform hummed. Kids with suitcases, parents with bundles of food, counselors with clipboards and voices trained to carry over noise. All the suitcases looked roughly the same, brown, gray, plywood-sided, tied with rope for extra security. All the parents had roughly the same expression, that particular mix of pride and worry that I couldn't read back then but understand completely now. Dad set down the suitcase and looked around. "Registration's over there," he said, nodding toward a woman with a list. "Go check in." I went, and right there, at the far edge of the crowd where the platform opened up into open air, I saw Sashka Gromov, a classmate. We weren't close friends exactly. When we said hi in the hallways, copied off each other during tests sometimes. But there he was, standing with the exact same brown suitcase, his mother beside him, a short, round woman in a light raincoat, fussing with his collar while he endured it with the expression of a man counting down his final minutes. I walked over. "Sashka." He turned, saw me, and his face changed. The way a face changes when something unexpectedly gets easier. "Seryoga, what are you doing here?" "Going," I said, "to the sanatorium." "The Carpathians?" "The Carpathians." He laughed, short, relieved. "My mom snagged a voucher," he said. "I thought I was going to spend 3 weeks surrounded by total strangers." "We'll stick together," I said. It wasn't a promise or a pact, just words. But we both felt that we'd said something that mattered. The train left at 8:12. I stood at the corridor window and watched the platform. Dad stood below with one hand in his pocket. He always did that when he didn't know what to do with his hands. Mom raised her palm, just raised it and held it there, not waving, just holding it up, like she wanted to make sure I'd remember. I remembered. The platform slid backward, slowly at first, then faster. My parents shrank. First I could see them clearly, then they became just 2 figures among other figures. Then they were gone around the bend. What remained was the gray morning sky, the wires running alongside the tracks, and the smell of the railway. Metal, oil, something faintly bitter that I've never been able to forget. Something tightened in my chest. I didn't let myself think about it and went to find Sashka. He'd already claimed a compartment and taken the window seat. Across from us sat 2 strangers, a boy of about 12 with enormous ears, and a girl around our age who immediately buried herself in a book and pretended we didn't exist. "Sit down," Sashka said. 8 hours probably." I sat. Outside the window, the city's outskirts drifted past. Gray fences, garages, vegetable patches, then open fields, wide and empty under a low sky. 8 hours, the Carpathians. I still had no idea what was waiting there. By the second hour, everyone knew each other. That's just how it goes on long train rides. especially when you're 14 and there's nothing to do. First you stare out the window. Then you start glancing at the people across from you. Then someone says something that doesn't really matter. And suddenly the compartment is alive. And someone's digging out food. And the big-eared kid turns out to be Kolka from Zaporizhzhia. And he's doing an impression of his gym teacher. And everyone's laughing. I remembered Kolka immediately. He was the kind of kid you remember. Not because he was good-looking or smart, but because he was loud, relentless. He could pull a conversation out of any silence the way a magician pulls a handkerchief out of thin air, effortlessly, like there was no other way to be. He was 13, younger than Sashka and me, but he carried himself like he was the oldest person in the car. "Last summer I went to Pioneer Camp," he was saying, swinging his leg. "And our counselor, total idiot, I'm telling you, made us do calisthenics at 6 in the morning. 6, I told him, I'm still sleeping. He said, rise and shine. So I got up and went back to sleep. He sent me to the director." "And?" Sashka asked. "Nothing. The director was also asleep." Everyone laughed. Kolka looked satisfied. Around lunchtime, the food came out. This was its own ritual, one every Soviet kid knew, the unwrapping of home-packed food on the train. Everyone had their own. I had hard-boiled eggs, buttered bread, and cutlets in foil that Mom had wrapped while they were still hot, and which had long since gone cold, but were still better than anything. Sashka had fried chicken, cucumbers, and a thermos of tea. Kolka produced an entire mesh bag, cabbage pies, tomatoes, a chunk of fatback wrapped in newspaper, and boiled potatoes in a small pot swaddled in a kitchen towel. "My mom packed it," he announced proudly, unloading everything onto the little fold-down table. "She says the food there is going to be terrible." "The food everywhere is terrible," said the girl with the book philosophically. Her name was Tanya, she was from Kiev, and she never did finish her chapter, Food 1. We spread everything out together and ate, watching out the window. The landscape had changed. No more flat steppe. Now it was hills, soft and green, with dark stripes of forest along the ridge lines. It was getting more beautiful. It was getting further from home. Toward evening, the train car changed. During the day, it had been noisy and restless. Kids running up and down the corridor, someone playing cards, the attendant making announcements twice that nobody listened to. But when the sky outside went from blue to purple to black, everything quieted on its own. The younger kids settled into their compartments. The older ones stayed. They gathered in the corridor, 7 or 8 of them, leaning against the walls and windows. Sashka, Kolka, and I drifted over. There was a guy of about 16, tall, close-cropped hair from Kharkiv, introduced himself as Stas. He sat on the fold-down seat by the window and watched the rest of us with that calm, slightly narrowed look that belongs to people who know something you don't. "Anyone been to the Carpathians before?" he asked, not really directing it at anyone. Most people shook their heads. "I was there last year," he said. "Same sanatorium." "So how was it?" Kolka asked. Stas was quiet for a moment. Outside, dark trees were rushing past, close to the tracks, almost pressing against the glass. The car swayed. "Strange place," he said finally. "Mountains, forest, beautiful during the day, At night, different story. You're gonna tell ghost stories? Someone smirked. Not ghost stories, Stas said evenly. Just what I saw. Nobody left. Kolka pulled his knees to his chest and got comfortable. Tanya closed her book. The car rocked. The wheels knocked out their steady rhythm. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. And Stas began to speak. Quietly, without drama, the way people only talk about things they actually believe. Outside there was darkness and trees, and ahead the Carpathians. We arrived at dawn. The bus from the station took about 40 minutes, first on pavement, then on something that could only generously be called a road. We bounced around. The luggage shifted in the baggage compartment. Someone in the back quietly complained about getting carsick. Outside the windows, mountains were rising, slowly, as if growing straight up out of the earth while we watched. Dark, heavily forested with strips of morning fog caught in the ravines. I hadn't slept all night on the train, and I watched all of this with that strange sharpness that only comes from no sleep. When everything looks almost too clear, like you're seeing it through glass. Now those are mountains, Kolka said quietly, pressing his nose against the window. Nobody answered. Everyone was looking. The sanatorium was called Mountain Air. I read it on the sign at the gate, blue letters on white, one of them slightly crooked. Beyond the gate opened a courtyard. 3 concrete buildings, tiled pathways between them, flower beds planted with marigolds, a flagpole with a Soviet flag hanging perfectly still in the windless morning. On a bench by the entrance sat a cat, watching us with complete indifference. The whole place had the feeling of somewhere that had been expecting us for a long time and had grown a little tired of waiting. A counselor, a heavy-set woman in her mid-40s, blue smock, clipboard, came out and began calling names. Her voice was loud and practiced. They sorted us into buildings and rooms quickly, without ceremony. Gromov, Novikov, Building 3, Room 12, she said, without looking up. Sashka nudged me with his elbow. They'd put us together. The room was small. 4 beds, 4 nightstands, 1 window facing the forest. Not the mountains, not the courtyard, directly onto the trees, which began about 100 yards from the building and climbed the slope beyond, dense and dark, with no gaps between them. The other 2 in the room were twins from Odessa, Igor and Vitya, distinguishable only by the fact that Vitya squinted and Igor didn't. They'd already settled in, claimed the beds by the window, and were unpacking with the efficient air of people who know exactly what they're doing. Schedules on the nightstand, Vitya said without turning around. Breakfast at 8, procedures starting at 9, lunch at 1, rest hour, afternoon snack, dinner, lights out at 10. How do you know all that? Sashka asked. I can read. The procedures started the next day. A nurse, young, tired-looking, called us in one at a time and handed each of us a personal treatment plan. Mine included pine baths every other day, inhalation therapy, electrophoresis on the neck and collar zone, and ultraviolet light treatment. The UV sessions happened in a separate room. You lay down on a cot. They put these small black goggle discs over your eyes, and a violet lamp started humming above you. You'd lie there staring up at the ceiling through those goggles, and the ceiling looked like the bottom of some other world. The pine bath smelled sharp and resinous. Electrophoresis meant wet medicated pads pressed against your skin with a mild current running through them. Not painful, just strange. A faint pulse under your skin, and you'd lie there thinking, what exactly is the point of any of this? It's for your health, the nurse said when I asked. For what specifically? She looked at me over her glasses. For everything, she said, and made a note in my file. In the evenings, we sat on the steps of Building 3. The mountains darkened, and the forest darkened before the mountains did. The cafeteria served dried fruit compote and pearl barley porridge that nobody ate, though the bowls kept appearing anyway. Somewhere in Building 1, someone was playing guitar, the same 3 chords over and over. I watched the forest. From our room window, it looked like just a forest. But in the evenings, when the light left and the trees merged into one dark wall, it looked different, deeper, like something without a bottom started just behind the first row of pines. Yoga, Sashka said beside me. What are you staring at? Nothing, I said, just looking. But I already felt something even then. Not fear exactly, just the sense that the forest was looking back. Stas showed up on the 3rd day. I'd seen him on the train, but at the sanatorium he'd somehow disappeared. Different building, different schedule. Then one evening he just sat down next to us on the steps, like he'd always been there. He pulled out a cigarette, rolled it between his fingers, but didn't light it, just held it. Settling in, he asked. More or less, Sashka said. Kolka immediately scooted closer. He was drawn to Stas the way kids and dogs are drawn to people who know something interesting, some instinct, something wordless. You said you were here last year, Kolka said. You started telling us on the train, but everyone went to sleep. That's right, said Stas. So what did you see? Stas looked at the forest. The sun had already dropped behind the ridge, and the trees stood in that gray haze that exists between sunset and actual darkness. Not day, not night. Something in between, with no name for it. We went into the forest, he said finally. 4 of us. About a week after we arrived, in the middle of the night. Just for something to do, on a dare. There's a trail at the edge of the grounds. Easy to miss. Runs along a stream. We followed it. And what did you find? Kolka asked. A cabin, said Stas. He told it without rushing. The cabin sat in a small clearing, maybe 20 minutes from the sanatorium if you knew the trail. Old, log-built, with a sagging roof. Not abandoned. That was the strange part. The door was held shut by a wooden latch, no padlock. Inside, a table, a cot with some kind of bedding, an iron stove, and on the table, a cup and a bowl. Not dusty. Like the owner had just stepped out and would be back shortly. Could be a forest ranger, Sashka offered. That's what I thought, Stas said. So the next day I asked our counselor, carefully, casually. She said there are no rangers assigned to that section of forest. Nobody maintains it. Old logging plots, abandoned. Then who? Stas finally lit the cigarette, exhaled slowly. You ever hear what happened after Chernobyl? Not to the animals, but to people, he said. It wasn't just wildlife that mutated. People changed too. Some of them looked fine on the outside, but something shifted inside. They left their cities, their villages, went into the forests, into the mountains, lived alone. That's just stories, Sashka said. Maybe, said Stas. Or maybe not. The exclusion zone isn't only where the reactor is. The cloud went wherever the wind took it. The Carpathians aren't that far, if you think about it. Kolka said nothing. I noticed he'd stopped swinging his leg. The next day, Stas showed me the trail. Just like that, we were walking back from our procedures, and he veered toward the fence and said, "See where that board is broken out? Follow the stream from there, maybe 15 minutes. Then right where you see a dead spruce. You won't get lost." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He shrugged. "In case you want to check for yourself." I didn't want to, not then. The idea to go at night didn't come all at once. It came from Kolka. Of course it did. Who else? Day 5, after dinner, sitting in the room with full darkness outside the window. He said it casually, staring at the ceiling. "Hey, what if we go to that cabin?" "No," said Sashka. "Why not?" "Because it's the middle of the night, because forest, because we'll get kicked out if they catch us." "They won't catch us. Lights out at 10, the counselor does her rounds at 10:30, then she's out till morning." I checked. "When did you check?" I asked. Kolka just grinned. Stas knocked on our door at 9 o'clock, like he already knew. He said quietly, "So, are we going?" I looked at Sashka. Sashka looked at me. "We're going," I said. We grabbed flashlights. Kolka, for reasons nobody could explain, brought a pocket knife. Small red handle, completely useless. The loose board in the fence gave way easily. The forest took us immediately. Darkness, the smell of pine and wet earth. A silence where the only sounds were the stream and our own footsteps. Our flashlight beams cut narrow yellow cones out of the black. The trail ran alongside the water, barely visible, but it was there. The dead spruce stood exactly where Stas had said. We turned right. The cabin appeared out of the darkness suddenly and just materialized in front of us. Low, dark, the doorway a slightly lighter rectangle in the black. Exactly as he'd described it. The latch was open. I shone my flashlight on the fire pit in front of the entrance. The coals were still warm. Someone had been here very recently. Inside the cabin it smelled like smoke and something animal. I didn't identify it right away, just felt it. This smell doesn't belong in a place where people live. Not quite. Stas swept his flashlight around the corners. Everything as he'd described. Table, cot, iron stove. But something had changed since last year. The wall had marks on it now. Deep scratches in the wood, parallel, in sets of 3. Too high up for a person standing normally against the wall. Too deep for fingernails. "Those are claws," Kolka said quietly. Nobody argued. On the table lay something Stas hadn't seen on his first visit. Bones. Small ones. Cleanly picked. Stacked in a neat, almost deliberate pile. Not human. Some animal, maybe a rabbit. But the neatness of that pile was wrong. Animals don't stack bones, and people don't leave that smell. "We're leaving," Sashka said. His voice was steady, but I knew him well enough to hear what was underneath it. "Wait," Kolka started. We're leaving. Stas was already at the door. He looked at the fire pit outside, then raised his flashlight and aimed it into the darkness beyond the clearing. The beam hit the tree line and disappeared. Yeah, he said quietly. We're leaving. We came out and moved fast. Not running yet, but walking the way you walk when you badly want to run but don't want to be the one who breaks first. The trail went downhill toward the stream, our flashlight beams bouncing off the ground. Kolka was last. I could hear his breathing behind me, quick and shallow. He wasn't talking. That alone was strange. We'd gone maybe 50 yards. That's when I heard it. Not footsteps. Something else. Heavy movement in the forest to our right, not on the trail, straight through the undergrowth. Not careful. Like whatever was moving didn't feel the need to hide. Branches snapping, not the way they snap in wind or from small animals. Heavy, with the crack of something solid giving way. Stas stopped first. We all stopped. We turned off the flashlights at the same moment. No one said to. We all just understood. The darkness that followed was total. For the first few seconds, I couldn't see anything at all. I could only hear. The stream, my own heartbeat, and that movement, still coming, angling to the right, like it was circling around us. Then it stepped into the clearing. I can't describe it precisely, not because I don't remember, because what you see in darkness by weak moonlight, your brain doesn't fully process in real time. What you're left with are fragments. Large, very large. I understood that before I could make out any shape. Too tall for a bear on all fours. Dark, darker than the darkness around it, as if it absorbed light rather than reflected it. It didn't move the way animals move. Not fluidly, not stalking. It moved in lurches, like something in its movement was broken, glitching. Step, pause, step, pause. Each pause was worse than the step. It stopped. The smell hit me before I fully registered it. The same smell as in the cabin, but stronger, thicker, alive. Then it made a sound. Not a roar, not a howl. Something in between. Low, chest deep, with a rasp running through it. The sound of a creature that doesn't warn you, that is already decided. Stas ran first. I don't remember deciding to run. 1 second I was standing, the next I was sprinting down the trail, flashlight on, the beam jumping wildly across the ground and trees, branches whipping my arms. Sashka was running beside me. I could hear him breathing. Stas was ahead. He knew the trail best. Behind us, crashing. It was coming, not running, walking, but the distance wasn't growing. Or maybe I just couldn't tell. I didn't look back. That was the only right decision I made that entire night. Don't look back. Just run, watch the ground, breathe. The fence appeared sooner than I expected. Gray wood, the broken board. Stas went through first, then me, then Sashka. I hit the ground on the other side on my knees, got up, turned around. Kolka wasn't there. Kolka, I said. Silence, the stream, darkness beyond the fence. Kolka, Sashka called. Barely a whisper. Louder felt wrong. I couldn't have explained why, I just knew. No answer. Stas stood beside me, staring at the broken board. His face was something I hadn't seen on him before. Not frightened. Empty. He fell behind, Stas said. Not a question, not a statement. Just words he said out loud to make them real. Beyond the fence, it was quiet. We waited for him until 2 in the morning. All 3 of us, sitting by the fence, saying almost nothing. Twice Stas got up like he was going back out, and both times I watched him stop at the broken board and just stand there and not go through. I didn't blame him. I wouldn't have gone either. Sashka was smoking. I hadn't known he smoked. He probably hadn't known it himself until that night. Some crumpled cigarette he'd found in his jacket pocket. His hands weren't shaking. He just smoked and stared into the dark. At 2 o'clock, Stas said, "We need to go back to the building." Nobody answered. "If they notice we're gone, it gets worse," he said. That was enough. We got up and went. I didn't sleep until morning. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the twins breathe, steady, peaceful, the way people breathe when everything is fine. Sashka in the next bed wasn't sleeping either. I could tell by how still he was. Too still. Nobody sleeps like that. We didn't talk. There were no words that fit what had happened. Outside the window, the forest began to lighten around 4:30. First, the trees just became slightly less black. Then shapes appeared. Then real gray dawn came, and the forest was just a forest again. Green, ordinary, full of birds. I looked at it and thought, how can it look like that, after everything? At breakfast, Kolka wasn't there. At first, nobody thought much of it. Maybe he overslept. Maybe he was running late. The counselor, Zinaida Pavlovna, went down her list, stopped, frowned, went to the building, came back with a different face. By 9 o'clock, the quiet scramble had begun. That particular Soviet scramble, where the adults clearly know something and are working very hard to look like everything is under control. They gathered us in the lobby and counted heads. Zinaida Pavlovna spoke in an even voice. "Don't worry. The boy probably went for an early walk. They'll find him shortly." Her voice was even. Her eyes were something else. 2 police officers arrived from the local station, an older one and a younger one, both in wrinkled uniforms. They spent 40 minutes behind closed doors with the sanatorium director, then came out and walked toward the forest. The older one carried a map board. The younger one carried nothing. I watched them from the lobby window. Stas stood beside me. He wasn't watching the officers. He was watching the broken board in the fence that nobody had fixed overnight. "They'll question us," I said quietly. "They will," he agreed. "What do we say?" He was quiet for a moment. "We don't know anything. We were asleep. We woke up and he was gone." He looked at me. "They won't believe us anyway, Seryozha. You understand that?" I understood. They questioned us after lunch, one at a time in the director's office. I sat across from the older officer and told him I'd been asleep. I hadn't heard anything. I barely knew Kolka. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. The officer looked at me for a long time. Then he wrote something in his notebook. "Go ahead," he said. I stood up and walked to the door. "Son," he said behind me. I turned around. "Stay out of the forest," he said, not like an order, like something else entirely. "These are strange parts." I didn't answer. I walked out. They never found Kolka. Not that day, not the next. The search went on for 3 days. Police, local men with dogs, some of the sanatorium staff. On the fourth day, they announced that the boy had most likely left the grounds voluntarily, and the matter was being handled with his family. The official version. Nobody challenged it out loud. I spent the remaining 2 weeks going to my procedures, eating barley porridge, staring out the window at the forest. Sashka barely spoke. Stas asked to go home 3 days after it happened. Said he was sick. They let him leave. I never saw him again. I'm 47 years old now. I live in a different city. I have a family, a job, everything that gets called a life. The sanatorium has been gone for a long time. The building was demolished in 1998, I found out by accident, reading some local paper online. Mountain Air. 2 lines between a land sale notice and a road repair update. Kolka was never found. I checked as many times as I could live with, and a few more beyond that. Nothing. Sometimes at night I think about that fire pit. The coals were still warm when we arrived. That means someone put out that fire shortly before we got there. Someone knew we were coming, or sensed us. I don't know what it was. A mutant, an animal, a person who had stopped being a person. I don't know. The Carpathians are vast. Chernobyl was real. And what exactly went into those forests after that cloud passed over? Nobody told us. Maybe that was the right call. Kolka's mother called our apartment in September. Once. My mother answered. I was standing right there. I could hear the voice through the receiver, quiet and steady. No tears left by then. She was asking whether Kolka had said anything about where he wanted to go. My mother said, "No, he didn't say anything. I'm so sorry." I never took the phone. That's the only thing I regret.